everybody. This is Amy Williams here with Skellig, and welcome to our mini-series, where we start to answer the question, how do we include legacy life science sites with Industry 4? Now, this is actually our second mini-series. The first one, I tried to explain why life sciences in general benefits from 4.0. And by the way, thank you everyone who liked, commented, and even shared. I'm so grateful you gave me a voice, and I'm thrilled to see the enthusiasm in the industry. But even though I tried to be comprehensive in that series, I recognize I still left out a whole group of people, the legacy sites. In the first series, I made the claim that the best way to succeed with Industry 4 is to start with the proper architecture known as the unified namespace. And for greenfield sites who have a pile of money, time to learn, time to plan, there's not as much getting in their way from turning a pile of dirt into a digital factory. And that's not the case for legacy. You guys have millions of dollars invested into your existing architecture. You can't just rip and replace that whole thing. And also, you're a little tied up, You're a bit busy actually doing the manufacturing. And sadly, this is why so many legacy sites are struggling today with making that jump from being a 3.0 facility to a 4.0 one, becoming a company who has data as their primary commodity. And the reason I know our industry is struggling with this is because Skellig is a life science systems integrator who has views of both sides of the fence, because we support both legacy and greenfield. For those who don't know, Skellig was founded by Paul O'Sullivan back in 2010 with the goal to improve how projects were done, put people and values first, and hopefully contribute to making medicine more accessible. At the time, though, the company's expertise started off just at that layer 1 process automation. Since then, the company has grown and expanded up the stack to include things like MES and systems architecture. But we still have automation SMEs devoted to supporting day-to-day operations at existing sites. I'm telling you this so you can trust we have a good sense of where the life science industry is at, because we keep dialogue channels open with everyone. And I need to be transparent here. So far, the 4.0 opportunities have been pretty much in greenfield or lab spaces. And when we talk to existing sites and ask them, hey, what kind of site support do you need? The requirements haven't changed all that much. Largely, everyone is still fighting the same battles from when this company was first founded over a decade ago. Time-consuming documentation, time-consuming validation, time-consuming integration. And man, isn't that disappointing? I thought Industry 4 was supposed to revolutionize manufacturing, increase productivity, improve our lives. But reality is that hasn't happened for most of us in pharma. And from our missions and values standpoint, this is unacceptable. If we want our employees to do the exciting, fulfilling work, and if we want families to actually get access to affordable treatments and keep local manufacturing jobs, it's not by letting the existing sites we have today continue to struggle. Which is why we're making this series, to hopefully help turn the tides and include as many life science manufacturers as possible with Industry 4. However, in order to solve a problem, you must first correctly identify it. And this is what I think the issue is. When it comes to Industry 4, you can have 1 of 4 responses, and 3 out of the 4 result in failure. I'm going to describe the 4 groups, and I want you to be honest about which one resonates the best with you. And spoiler alert, only group 4 is successful. Then, I'm going to explain why you don't want to be in groups 1 through 3, tell you how to avoid them, and instead be a group 4 person, pun intended. Okie dokes. So let's get into it. Option 1, you are apathetic. You hear about Industry 4 and dismiss it because you feel like it doesn't apply to you. Now, you might feel that way for one of two reasons. First, you don't see any use cases that impact your day-to-day job. Why do you want to hear about NQTT, UNS AI? None of that stuff is at your site, and you're not getting paid to learn about it. Instead, you got a mountain of work to do, so you're going to focus on executing that well. You just don't have time to care about 4.0. Or even worse, it piques your interest, so you decide to look into it, and then you hear somebody say, don't even bother trying to use fancy 4.0 tools if you don't meet the minimum technical requirements of being open, edge-driven, lightweight, report by exception. Basically, everything your site isn't. And if your only input is, you don't have what it takes to be a part of my club, it's the rational choice to say good riddance and not engage. Okay, that is group 1, totally apathetic to 4.0. And fun fact, I used to be a group 1 person myself. Now, maybe group 1 doesn't resonate with you. You're sitting there saying, no, I know there's a middle ground. There's some path to get my existing 3.0 site to be a 4.0 one. And that's commonly marketed as digital transformation. And what's even better, you have some political power. You're a manager or director, somebody who can actually make a change. And since you see the value in 4.0, but aren't sure how to get there, you decide to get some external help. So you're excited. You set up a call with a consultant to get some answers, and you start by asking the same questions you ask for any project. And it goes like this. Hey there, great to meet you. I want to transform my site. What's the timeline and budget? And they say, there is no timeline. Budget's unknown. This process never ends. That's a weird answer. Okay, well, what should the first step be? What's the proof of concept? And they say, it depends. Can't answer without an assessment. Okay, in that case, tell me, what softwares do I at least need to buy? And they say, it depends. Can't answer without an assessment. Okay. So you say, let me simplify this for you. I want a UNS with equipment ABC. What does that ontology look like? And they say, it depends. Can't answer without an assessment. Okay, so at this point you say, thank you very much for your time. I'll get back to you. And you are frustrated. You got no answers, just a convenient promise that you gotta pay somebody to do an assessment to get you some direction. It feels weird. None of your past projects have gone like that. So you decide, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get a second opinion. So you go out and meet someone who says, hey, listen, everybody says the hot 4.0 stack on the market today is software stack A, B, C. And I do these projects all the time. If you want this, here's what you buy, here's the price, here's the timeline, here's the POC. Write this SOW, and we'll get started right away. That sounds good. So group 2 goes ahead and buys the project. And they are happy. A vendor is going to come in, give their company an upgrade, and then peace out. Now, the next group is group 3. And they have a little more patience. They also want to do digital transformation, but they heard the traditional project isn't the best way. And unlike group 2, they agree, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's start with that assessment. So they put their trust in the consultant and effectively get scammed. They get handed a comprehensive report, but when you look through it, the timeline goes out 5 years, the budget has a scary number of zeros, and it's not clear where to start. At this point, group 3 is thinking, dang, I would have been better off doing nothing like group 1, or at least getting a project like group 2. And what's even worse, is Group 3 has burned through most of their political capital and budget. But then there's Group 4, where they trusted the process and it worked out. And now they are the next Amazons and Teslas dominating their industry and probably aren't watching this video. At this point, we all have our groups and everyone has their number. So now we're going to go into why you don't want to be in groups 1 through 3 and tell you how to become a Group 4 person. So first up is Group 1, who just does not care about Industry 4. Let me start by saying some of the smartest people I have ever met fall into this group. And these are the people who have seen it all. They know all the random quirks of the system, and when something crazy happens, they're great at logically breaking down the problem, troubleshooting, or they know who to contact to get the answers. Basically, when things go south, you are thrilled when they pick up the phone. But here's the thing. That fantastic value-add work that they do is maybe only like 40% of the job. Because let's be honest, in pharma, 60% of the job is manually opening a change control, manually writing the description, routing it for pre-approval, addressing comments, updating documents, routing for post-review, routing the workflow, manually updating spreadsheets. Things that are laboring, time-consuming, and error-prone. And that's why I get so excited about Industry 4. It's all about flipping that ratio, enabling you to do what you're great at, solving the complex problems, and letting the computer handle the things it's good at, repetitive tasks. And that's why I want you to take an interest. I know things like NQTT, data ops, UNS can feel irrelevant, but they're important because the use cases that those things enable you to solve will 100% improve your day-to-day life. And I'm not asking you to become a systems architect. Listen, if you're the expert at level 1 plant floor control, I want you to keep excelling at that. But the way you're going to do that is by working at a digital plant that enables you to do your best work. And if you're not working at one of those now, you should put the pressure on your plant's architect or manager to move in that direction. Now let me give a quick example. Everybody usually works under some kind of project manager, and that PM has the valuable skill of identifying metrics for progress and enabling the team to stay on timeline to do the job. You need to have strong leadership, analytical thinking, and effective communication skills. And yet, how many of these project managers also get saddled with the task of daily meetings just to manually collect everybody's status? Ask, what's their percent complete, and then go write it in a tracker. I have done multiple projects where it's literally someone's full-time job to maintain a massive Excel spreadsheet of document statuses. Over the course of a year, how many hundreds of hours are wasted just gathering information? Moreover, it's opinion-based information. I'm 50% done. What does that even mean? That's not reliable. Now, imagine instead you have a unified namespace, and one of the nodes is an open architecture CMMS or documentation system that you could query, maybe with an API that can then publish back to the UNS. Because the thing is, the status of a document, drafting, routed, approved, rejected, checked out, those are all data points. Type string, but still a data point. That same PM would still do the valuable work of identifying key metrics to monitor, but instead of manually collecting that information, they could have an intelligence sheet linked to the document namespace, which would update automatically in real time. Then 100% of their meeting time would be devoted to the value-add work of evaluating, what do we prioritize? How do we allocate resources? How do I remove roadblocks for things that fell behind? Now, we have the technology to do that sort of thing in theory today. So imagine how great things could be in like 5 years. For example, right now, a lot of us use templates to try to accelerate writing change controls. But still, at the end of the day, we have to click through those digital pages, fill in the drop-downs, repeat the description, delete the red text, still do error-prone manual activities, which means it needs a cycle of review from at least CSV, maybe CQV, and QA. Now, envision a world where you updated the code in your development system. You take an export, and a script automatically gets you your red lines in your design spec. And maybe some kind of LLM, like a ChatGPT sort of thing, could help redline the first draft of the functional spec. Because the functional spec is supposed to be just the English version of your code anyway. Then, a script could parse those documents to populate the first draft of your change control and test template. It could extract the software list of control modules updated. It could extract the document name and revision. It could utilize the employee namespace from the UNS to populate the reviewers. No typos, standard wording, accurate information. That alone would save days, if not weeks, of time on review cycles. And then the engineers and QA groups can focus 100% of their time on making sure the content of the test is actually robust. And another cool example would be automatically filing drug reports. Because again, if your data is structured, like in a UNS, it becomes really easy to automatically insert that information into any kind of document or report. So those are some of the fun conversations happening in the 4.0 world that I want everyone to benefit from. But here's the catch. If we go this direction, we're not going to run out of work. Rather, the work that we're going to do is going to evolve. Be more fulfilling, but different. If we have machines doing the manual documentation, the act of manually transcribing changes, manually collecting data, that's not going to be a valuable skill to have anymore. Our roles will shift from routine manual tasks to higher level problem solving and innovation. And that shift is starting to happen in our industry now, which is another reason I don't want you to be apathetic about 4.0. Because the technology and skills you need to stay ahead in your career are also evolving. For example, many of us use virtual machines to run our applications. And listen, I love VMs, but I'd argue a 4.0 evolution of them is containers. Containers, especially with Kubernetes, and if your software supports using Git, allow for much more efficient resource utilization, faster startup times, and much easier scalability. And most importantly, they enable a build once, run anywhere approach. Now, containers are just one example of a new technology, but you might be sitting there thinking, okay, that's great, but my system runs on a VM, and that's not changing anytime soon. How am I supposed to do 4.0? Well, stay tuned and watch the rest of this series, because the next parts are devoted explicitly to answering that question. And be rest assured, I promise, even if your site today doesn't meet a single minimum technical requirement of being edge-driven, lightweight, report by exception, or open, there is still a path for you to become a successful digital company. Okay. Hopefully at this point, all of my Group 1 people are at least interested in adopting 4.0. So let's make sure that you don't jump into Groups 2 or 3. So let's recap what went wrong with Group 2. And the problem with Group 2 is they didn't digitally transform. They just did a project with some new software. And the first problem with that is a cookie-cutter solution does not get you best-in-class results. It's a red flag to me if somebody says, I know what your existing site needs without doing some kind of evaluation. All I'm hearing is, I have the answers without understanding the problem. And what's really exciting is the market has exploded with products to help you connect, collect, and store data. And figuring out what's best for your use case will depend on a variety of factors, like what functionality do you already have? What's your budget? What's the scale of data points you're dealing with? All of those nuances change what is truly the best option for your site. And the second problem is traditional projects only address the technology and fail to fix the underlying issues with the business culture that caused the company to fall behind in the first place. A business is much more than its technology. It's primarily about the people who work there. And if they don't have the right mindset, education, or just wrong strategy, the technology delivered from that project doesn't really matter in the big picture. Because when that project is done and that contractor leaves, they take their expertise with them. And if your people don't understand the philosophy behind why that technology was picked, you're not going to sustain that innovation moving forward. Rather than progressing what's been delivered, you're much more likely to regress it. Which brings us to issue number 3. It is impossible to become a digital company with just one project. A 4.0 company is forever evolving, and if your pathway to improvements is always these big external projects, you're always going to be behind the curve. It's too slow, it's too expensive. Rather than rely only on external projects, a digital company has their expertise in-house who can quickly iterate to solve problems. So how do you get out of group 2? That's simple. If you want to digitally transform, don't approach it like a traditional project. But there's a little more to it, because we don't want to become group 3. So let's talk about them. Group 3 did get a few things right. They recognized that digital transformation is a journey, not a one-and-done project. And since they didn't have any in-house 4.0 expertise, it was a good call to try and get external help. And it was correct to start with an assessment so their approach is custom to solve their unique problems. But where it went horribly wrong was in the execution. The delivered assessment and proposed plan was a huge waste of time, money, and political capital. And this is the big challenge for Group 3. If they don't know how to do digital transformation, because if they did, they'd be a 4.0 company by now, how can they vet the person they're hiring to help them does? Especially when answers to questions for things like step, budget, timeline are all, it depends. Well, I have some good news. Those are just the wrong questions to be asking. It's not a project, so don't ask typical project questions. Instead, a much more productive conversation would be to understand what is their approach to digital transformation. The good news is, I think there are a lot of ways to get it right. So I'm not going to sit here and say, you can only do it X way. Instead, I'm going to give you 6 questions you can ask to weed out those who will definitely get it wrong. So, first question you need to ask is, how long is this assessment going to take? In either hours, days, weeks, months, years? You're just looking for a rough order of magnitude. I'd want the answer to be in a matter of weeks. If they are telling you it's a 6-month assessment and the price tag has over 6 zeros, run. No one needs 6 months to figure out what is wrong with your plant. Especially in pharma, my goodness, we document everything. The path that led to your data silos was meticulously documented, reviewed, and maintained. Figuring out what's not working is the easy part. If the evaluation is taking months, what's happening is they're trying to plan out granular answers to every single problem you have. And to no surprise, that's going to take years. And the problem with that is absolutely no one can predict how we're going to solve problems in the future. Let's say that deliverable identified 50 problems. If I'm not getting around to problem 49 for a few years, I'm not going to waste my time going into details on how to solve it. There's no guarantee that what we consider a best-in-class approach today is going to be the same thing years from now. Look how fast over the past 2 years language models like ChatGPT have evolved and impacted the way we work. Look at how many features things like HiByte have added in the past years, like pipelines, dynamic inputs, 2-hour time trials. I have no idea what my favorite software is going to look like in 2030, but I bet the way I use it is going to be really different. And there's nothing wrong with having long-term milestones to keep you focused. That's a good thing. But that does not take months to figure out. Any massive budgets and predictions on how you'll be digitally transforming years from now aren't going to be accurate, and they're not worth the money. Though, if you can predict the future, I am begging you, please quit engineering and call me. You are my new investment broker, and we are putting Warren Buffett to shame. But for the rest of us mere mortals with day jobs, this brings us to our second question, which is, ask if the strategy is generally waterfall or agile. You should be looking for agile. Waterfall is a linear and sequential approach where deliverables are all defined up front. They're not expected to change. And it's awesome for predictable projects. But as we said before, digital transformation should not be approached like a classic project. Instead, we want an agile approach. It's much more iterative. You do tiny sprints and can easily change the scope or requirements for the next sprint depending on the feedback. And this protects the manufacturer in 2 ways. First, you ensure every dollar of your 4.0 budget gets value. If you're not getting value, just don't rehire them for the next sprint. And second, even if a mistake was made, because digital transformation is hard, the impact is small because the scope is small. It's much easier to recover from. Now, the third question I want you to ask is if one of the deliverables is a clear and recommended proof of concept. You'd think that's a given, but it's not. Some reports will give you a laundry list of things to fix, but that's not strategic, that's not actionable. You know, the saying goes, don't waste your time rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Your POC should be unique and focused on what adds the most value to your company. Fourth question, does the deliverable include a quantitative measurement of your enterprise's maturity? This is extremely powerful because assuming you have buy-in on how you got that score, having clear metrics to measure progress will help keep you on track. I have a sad story that I want you guys to learn from. Early on, when 4.0 UNS wasn't that popular, we had the opportunity to do an innovative project with some new technology. But it was just a project, not a kickoff to digital transformation. They weren't interested in any enterprise assessments or workshops. They just wanted technology delivered for an area. So we came in, did the project, they were happy, our scope ended, and we left. Sadly, since then, they have made technological choices that we disagree with, but it's out of our control. And I'd like to think that in another timeline where we got to do that maturity assessment, during those meetings, the remaining employees could have brought up the rubric and said, hey, if you go this route, clearly you're going to regress X points and go against the things you said yourself were critical to success when we started. And maybe they'd be on a better trajectory today. But alas, that's not the case. Which brings me to the fifth thing I want you to ask about. Does part of the plan include addressing leadership? That's essential. Because if you're still a 3.0 company today, it's not the technology's fault. We know things like containers, unified namespace, enterprise brokers work. If your company isn't moving in that direction, it's because your business strategy isn't adaptive enough. And so the last characteristic that I want you to ask about is, does their plan include building up the manufacturer's expertise? Because nothing scares me more than hearing, hey, we're going to come in, give you a lot of fancy 4.0 stuff, but you have to contact us if you want to change anything. That sounds great for the SI's money making, but horrible for your innovation. When somebody tells you they can help you become a 4.0 company, part of the plan better include education. SIs, like systems integrators, consultants, they are great to help you get started. But the long-term goal is that you really become the subject matter expert of everything in your plan. Okay, so that was 6 green flags to look for to avoid being a group 3 person who got ripped off by the consultant and instead be successful in group 4. And it's worth mentioning, if you don't want to hire a consultant and just want to learn how to do this yourself or see an example maturity rubric, I do recommend checking out the mastermind group from IIoT University. Now, disclaimer, it's not free, and no, I don't get paid to mention them or anybody in any video that I do. I mention them because they're the only people I know who are trying to teach what has worked for them and build a community so manufacturers can have more options. So if you're stuck and you need help, you're not limited to only calling up Intellic or only calling up Skellig. There is a growing number of people who are qualified to assist, and IIoTU has definitely contributed to those numbers and at least deserves the recognition. So to recap, we went through the common responses to Industry 4 and identified how to fix them. Nobody should be in Group 1 or be apathetic about 4.0, because ignoring technology will just make your life unnecessarily difficult. And if you're working at a legacy plant that's not a digital company, you should try to be. But you're not going to get there by doing a simple project, which was Group 2. Instead, you need to address not only the technical limitations, but the business and leadership ones, all without wasting your money, which was Group 3. And the safest and most successful way to do that is to start with a good assessment that points to a POC and takes an agile approach from there. But I realize there is still a gap, because that Group 4 approach requires some political power. That call is usually made from a manager or director. But what about all the engineers out there who know there's a better way, but their company isn't giving them the time or the money to figure it out? Well, we're going to talk about that problem in the next video, so stay tuned. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.